Welcome to Indianomics. The Indian economy remains the fastest growing large economy, but in the past month, the stock market is smelling some speed bumps. First, it was some slowdown one saw in the IIP numbers, core sectors, auto sales. Now, post the latest Q2 results, most economists see the second quarter GDP growth as well, slowing to maybe 6.5% from the earlier 6.7 in Q1 and earlier estimates of even over 7%. More important, the election of Donald Trump may stir more headwinds to both global growth and uncertainty for the Indian economy. To answer a wide range of questions on the Indian economy, I have with me Sanjeev Sanyal, economist and member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Sanjeev recently authored a brilliant paper on the relative performance of states, so time permitting, we'll discuss that too. But Sanjeev, very warm welcome to you to Indianomics. Let me start with these slowdown fears. The market is ringing it loud and clear. How much would you worry about the slowdown signs we saw in the second quarter?
Now, of course, we watch the cyclical indicators, high-frequency indicators, and yes, there are some of those indicators are signaling there's some degree of slowdown. So we take that seriously. On the other hand, we have lots of space on the fiscal side and on the monetary side to respond. So it's not like we don't have tools to respond. As you know, the Reserve Bank has not yet even embarked on the easing cycle, really. So those tools are there. And of course, on the fiscal side, we have been quite tight fiscally. In fact, some would even accuse us that the spending is lagging behind the budget numbers on the capital spending side. So that is something we can easily ramp up, even while remaining within our budgeted numbers. So there's lots of space on the fiscal and monetary side to respond.
Fair point. Actually, since the last 2 months, the government cash balances, which were running at 4 lakh crore, have now come down to practically neutral. So clearly the government has spent in the past 6 weeks or so. But, what is hurting is urban consumption. We saw that in most of the FMCG companies. Metro consumption has gone down. Will that recover so much with government spending or with this better than expected monsoon? That seems to be a persisting pain point.
See, the economy doesn't function in silos. So if you spend on one part of the economy, the cash flow, other parts also improve. So we'll see how it goes. We have to be always careful that when we do some sort of a monetary, fiscal, or any other kind of measure, that we do it in a measured way and don't overdo it as well. And you've seen that we are quite conservative, but that doesn't mean that we don't pay attention. So we have already begun to pay attention to this. And as you yourself mentioned, there's some responses already in the pipeline.
Well, let me come to the monetary response as well. The last inflation number we got was 6.2, largely because of food prices. But regardless, the headline inflation is 6.2. So can there be monetary easing in spite of that?
So that's a judgment the Monetary Policy Committee has to take. Obviously, these are the kinds of trade-offs that policymakers make all the time on a routine basis. So as these numbers evolve, and we have now new data, the vegetable prices have come off. Have they come off enough? We'll see. So, but it's not that none of these issues are not known to the Reserve Bank or to the Monetary Policy Committee. They are also making trade-offs along the way. So it's a matter of making practical trade-offs. A car is driven both with an accelerator and a brake, and the art of combining the two is really about how you drive it. So, we are paying, as policymakers, paying close attention to all these issues.
That's a great metaphor. I'm just, there is some discussion these days that it is food inflation and it is not core inflation. So interest rates should not be the weapon. Where are you in that discussion?
No, I mean, I understand. I mean, this is not rocket science in any which way. All these arguments have been made they are routinely made, and every time there is a debate about whether to change direction of monetary or fiscal policy. So all the members of the Monetary Policy Committee are aware of these issues. The Reserve Bank and the governor and his team are also aware of it. We here in the government, in the Prime Minister's Economic Council are aware. The Finance Ministry is aware. So these are all trade-offs we have to make. And, I can't speak for the MPC, but some trade-offs will be made. So it's not because of lack of understanding of these trade-offs.
Okay, fair point. Let me come to the new development globally, the election of President Trump, and probably along with Congress and both houses of Congress. How do you think things change for the global economy? Are you expecting more uncertainty, more inflation? Just what are the first thoughts?
Well, I mean, we have worked with President Trump in the past, so he's not an entirely unknown person, and his ideas are not unknown. We will deal with it as it comes. I mean, he has signaled ahead that he intends to increase tariffs specifically on Chinese, but also on everybody else. So there may be some tariff increases for us as well. On the other hand, if there is massive increases on Chinese tariffs, as you're flashing on the screen, then on a relative basis, we could benefit. There can also be a situation, because if the idea behind all of this is a return of manufacturing to the US, let me point out that they too, like if policymakers in India have to make trade-offs, they also have to make trade-offs. So let's say they dramatically increase tariffs on all products, some more for Chinese, but for everybody, and attempt to manufacture stuff in the US. Fair enough. But then do remember what happens for them. First of all, inflation will go up in the US, but not in the rest of the world, because remember, it'll have a dampening effect on the rest of the world, but increase inflation in the US. To compensate for that, they will actually have to outsource non-merchandise activities to the rest of the world. After all, they can't manufacture everything, especially when they're pushing out illegal immigrants who could be potentially cheap labor for their factories. So in that situation, they will have to make a trade-off. And that trade-off they will eventually make is that they will have to outsource all their services inputs, which ironically is good for us. So I can't predict exactly how this will work out. But, in any system, you are making trade-offs. If their trade-off is to hike tariffs, then they'll have to accept some inflation. And they will have to accept outsourcing of services, which is good for us.
Yeah. There is broadly a feeling that, US exceptionalism is high. That stock market is signaling it loud and clear. But next to the US, it is India, which is the safest or perhaps the most attractive. But my only worry on this issue, and then move on to the others, is whether, there will be global uncertainty, because again, supply chains are disrupted. So, business decisions could get delayed. So do you think that when you estimate FY26 India GDP, we have to account for a global headwind rather than a tailwind?
We already have a headwind problem, because the world economy has been in sort of weak for some time. And so it's not new. Whether this will add or subtract from it, I can only comment when I know exactly what will happen. And we are used to doing this. I mean, the game is not to have some grand 5-year plan. The flexibility of the fiscal and monetary and other policy responses is the game. And I hope we have demonstrated repeatedly that we are quite capable of doing it, whether it was during COVID or subsequently. We have shown that the Indian policymakers are among the most responsive and flexible in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I think our nimbleness was in full evidence, the way we handled crude during the Ukraine war. So I'm not in doubt of our capability. It's just that if the world doesn't absorb.
No. So our game is not to predict what will happen, but to move fast as it happens. Because there are infinite number of things that can happen. And the world is always uncertain. I've never seen the world not being uncertain. So nimbleness is a very important part of the game. Let's see what happens and we'll respond. My point is that no matter what happens, we can tell you that we will get you a good deal out of, given the circumstances. So whether it is, being able to maneuver enough to get Russian oil during the oil price spike, or any other thing you have seen, we repeatedly move reasonably fast and long. Even though we get criticized sometimes in the short run, I think the longer term people have seen that some of the most of the trade-offs we make are generally good ones.
Well, let me come to this other interesting idea that Trump has put on the table, and it's good to go. The DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, to be run by Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk from outside the government, to cut it down probably by $2 trillion. Your comment, I mean, in the first place, won't that mean a bit of slowdown in the economy, deflation?
So let me say that, an effort to make government efficient, particularly the US government, is a very good thing. There are any large system accumulates huge amounts of inefficiencies over time. There are departments that, may have been useful once upon a time, but have sort of hung around for longer than they should have. Regulations, taxes, processes. So, that's true of every government. It's true of India as well. As you may be aware, we have a big effort to do process reforms right here. And I personally have been a part of that effort to do process reforms. Now, a few things where we are different in our effort from what, at least so far, the Musk-Ramaswamy effort with the DOGE sort of plan. So the way we have gone about it in India is that the process reform effort has been done by basically crossing the stream by feeling the pebbles. So we have not gone in the disruptive way that they are planning it. Now, some may say that, no, that is, you are being too gradualist. But let me tell you that their attempt is to cross the stream by doing a pole vault. Now, sure, you may get lucky and be able to do it right across in one shot. Best of luck to them. But I think they will quickly discover the following problem, which is why we have been much more gradualist, which is that you have to essentially fix the machine by still keeping the machine running. You can't shut down the machine. You say the government can't be shut down and you can't clean it up and then restart it. So, the efforts I have been making to do these kinds of changes, I have discovered that, there are all kinds of unintended consequences. So let's say there is a department that, or unit or autonomous body that needs to be shut down. Let's say that's true. But, there may be 10, 20% of the activities of that department that are actually useful and somebody else should be doing it. If you shut down the entire department, you'll actually cause something else to jam up. Now, in order to be able to look at that department, figure out that this is the 20% that is worth saving, that requires effort. Then you need to make sure you save that bit and transfer it somewhere else where it continues to happen. Or you change the whole process altogether so that, things don't break down, even if it is the case that 80% of the activities of that department should be shut down. That requires a much more nuanced application of mind than you can do with, slash and burn kind of thing that is at least at the first instance being promised. So I personally feel that they will over time temper their effort and begin to see the kinds of, there will be some obvious things you can shut down right in the beginning, but they will discover that they have to do it slowly. $2 trillion, I'm sure, can be cut from their spending, but I don't think they will be able to do it in the first year. It will require them at least 4 years to get there. And presumably, if they have done it in the correct way, the efficiency gains themselves will generate economic activities that will more than compensate for it. But if they try to do it in one shot in the first year, yes, it will cause all kinds of log jams.
Well, that brings me to the reforms in our own country. And for that, let me take a quick break. We'll come back and ask you those questions, Sanjeev, as also your interesting paper on states' performance. Back in a minute.